If you do this to a narcissist, something interesting starts to happen. Slowly, without them even realizing it, they lose their grip on you. They stop being able to control the situation, and over time, the power dynamic between you two shifts completely. It doesn't happen overnight, and it won't feel dramatic while it's unfolding. It's more like a slow leak in a tire they didn't even know they had. One day they're driving around fully in control, and the next they can't figure out why the whole thing feels wobbly and unstable. That instability is exactly what you're aiming for, not out of spite, but because it's the natural result of you finally refusing to play a role you never agreed to in the first place. Let me walk you through why this works, what's actually happening underneath the surface, and how you can start applying it in your own life, starting today. Narcissists are constantly chasing validation. It's not optional for them, it's fuel. Without a steady stream of admiration, attention, or reaction from other people, their entire sense of self starts to crumble. They can't function on their own for very long. They need an audience, they need supply, they need someone to feed off of, and that's exactly what they do. They drain the people around them of energy, of confidence, of peace of mind, all so they can keep propping up an inflated image of themselves. They treat the people in their orbit as tools, resources to be used however suits them best at any given moment, and they do this without a shred of guilt. Part of their strategy involves surrounding themselves with people who will follow their lead without pushing back, without asking too many questions, without challenging the story they've built about themselves. And when something goes wrong, when there's a mess to clean up or blame to assign, you can be sure it won't land on them. Taking responsibility simply isn't something they do. If you've spent any real time around a narcissist, you've probably noticed this pattern so many times that it almost becomes predictable. Something breaks down, tension rises, and within minutes, the story has already been rewritten so that someone else, usually you, ends up holding the bag. It's almost impressive how quickly they can pivot from being the cause of a problem to being its victim. And people in long-term relationships with narcissists, whether romantic partners, family members, friends, or coworkers, often end up feeling like they have no real choice but to go along with whatever the narcissist wants, simply because the alternative, pushing back, feels exhausting or even dangerous to the peace of the relationship. Here's the part that might surprise you, though. Underneath all that bravado, narcissists are actually deeply insecure. Their self-esteem is fragile, almost paper thin, and they live with a constant nagging fear that people are going to see through them and think less of them. And honestly, that fear is justified because on some level they know exactly what they're doing. They know the persona they present to the world isn't the whole truth. That's why they're always on guard, always ready to defend themselves the moment someone questions them or points out an inconsistency. Lying has become so second nature to them that the moment they sense any kind of accusation coming their way, they snap into defense mode almost automatically, like a reflex. It's not really a conscious choice at that point, it's closer to muscle memory. Ask them a simple, neutral question and watch how quickly it can turn into a full-blown standoff, as if you'd accuse them of something far worse than what you actually said. That overreaction isn't really about you at all. It's about the deep discomfort they feel anytime their carefully managed image gets even slightly questioned. The bigger the reaction, the more it usually tells you about how close you got to something true. If you look closely enough, you'll notice that narcissists are, at their core, pretty sad and hollow people. There's often an underlying current of depression running beneath the surface, one that becomes especially obvious whenever they're left alone with nothing but their own thoughts. That's precisely why they can't sit still emotionally. They need constant stimulation, constant input, constant drama or excitement to distract themselves from whatever emptiness lives underneath. And whenever things go wrong in their lives, they'll always find someone else to point the finger at. It's never their fault. If a narcissist ever tries to confront you, provoke you, or cause you harm, knowing how to respond calmly and firmly will show them, without a doubt, that you're not the kind of person they can push around. This is worth sitting with for a moment because it reframes a lot of what feels confusing about these relationships. The anger, the coldness, the need to control, none of it comes from a place of strength. It comes from fear. Fear of being exposed, fear of being ordinary, fear of not being enough without the mask. Understanding that doesn't excuse their behavior, and it definitely doesn't mean you owe them patience or forgiveness. But it can help you stop taking their behavior quite so personally, because so much of it was never really about you to begin with. It was about them managing their own internal chaos, the only way they know how, by controlling everyone and everything around them. Before we go any further, I just want to say thank you for sticking with this so far. If you're finding this helpful, consider sharing it with people in your life who might need to hear it too. And if this is your first time coming across content like this, it might be worth following along for more. Let's start with the first thing to watch out for: gaslighting. This is one of the narcissist's favorite tools. It's a form of psychological manipulation designed to make you question your own perception of reality, your own memory, even your own sanity. If you let it slide, if you don't recognize it for what it is, it can genuinely start to mess with your head. It's used to tarnish your reputation, throw you off center, and slowly chip away at your confidence and stability. The best defense here is simple, though not always easy. Stay firmly grounded in what you know to be true. When you refuse to let their distorted version of events take root in your mind, you hold on to yourself. You keep your footing. You don't need to abandon your own beliefs or perception just because someone else insists you're wrong or because they see things differently than you do. And here's something worth remembering. You don't actually need to win an argument with a narcissist. That battle is essentially unwinnable, so don't waste your energy trying to change their mind or get them to admit fault. They already know exactly what they're doing and exactly what they want, and no amount of logic, evidence, or reasoning is going to shift that. You could bring receipts, timestamps, witnesses, and it still wouldn't matter because the goal was never truth in the first place. The goal is control. Once you accept that, a certain kind of freedom opens up. You stop trying to solve an unsolvable puzzle and start putting that same energy toward protecting your own peace of mind instead. This brings us to the next point. Don't argue back. When a narcissist is trying to convince you of something you know isn't true, resist the urge to engage in a long back and forth. Most of the time, a short, neutral response is all that's needed. Something like a simple okay or followed by silence works far better than trying to explain yourself or defend your position. There's no need to elaborate, no need to justify anything. Stay assertive when the moment calls for it, but keep your tone level and controlled. Don't let them see you get rattled. Choose your battles wisely, because getting pulled into pointless arguments will only drain you and rarely leads anywhere productive. Less really is more when you're communicating with a narcissist. Don't let statements like "that never happened" or "I never said that" pull you into a spiral of trying to prove otherwise. These kinds of denials are classic examples of them rewriting the narrative in real time, and engaging with them on their terms just gives them more material to work with. The more you try to defend yourself against a lie, the more it starts to look, at least to any onlookers, like there might be two sides to something that's actually pretty one-sided. Narcissists count on this. They know that a long emotional explanation from you can be twisted into evidence that you're the unstable one, the dramatic one, the one who can't let things go. So the less fuel you hand them, the harder it becomes for them to spin the story in their favor. Sometimes the most powerful response is simply staying quiet. A simple nod, a knowing look, or a neutral sound like can communicate everything that needs to be said without giving them anything to twist or use against you. Silence in these moments speaks louder than any explanation could. Your intended meaning still comes through clearly, even without words. Saying that their behavior doesn't affect you, through your calm demeanor rather than your words, sends exactly that message. It shows that you see the situation for what it is. That quiet clarity gives you everything you need to understand what's really going on and to respond accordingly without playing into their game. Remember that simply not reacting is itself a form of resistance. It denies them the emotional reaction they're fishing for. Think about it from their perspective for a second. Their entire strategy depends on getting some kind of rise out of you. Anger, tears, defensiveness, panic. Anything that lets them feel like they still have influence over your inner state. When you deny them that, when your face stays calm and your voice stays even, you're essentially cutting off their supply in that moment. It might frustrate them even more at first because they're not used to a lack of response, but over time it teaches them on some level that this particular tactic doesn't work on you anymore. Beyond that, it's important to let go of any expectation that this person is going to change or give you what you actually deserve from a relationship. There's a cost to holding on to that hope. If you want any kind of interaction with them to go smoothly, you need to be honest with yourself first about who they really are and what you can realistically expect from them. Don't hold people to a higher standard than the one they've already shown you through their actual behavior in terms of decency, honesty, kindness, or genuine care. If you can manage that shift in perspective, you'll find yourself far less blindsided and far less hurt by their behavior going forward. It puts the power back in your hands, even when you're dealing with someone acting in a genuinely toxic way. This isn't about becoming cynical or losing your ability to trust people in general. It's specifically about calibrating your expectations to match the actual demonstrated behavior of this particular person, rather than the potential you keep hoping they'll live up to. Hope is a beautiful thing in most areas of life, but with a narcissist, misplaced hope is usually what keeps people stuck in cycles of disappointment far longer than they need to be. People who tend to be more empathetic naturally want to focus on the good in others, on the potential, on the best version of a person. But when it comes to narcissists, that kind of optimism usually backfires. Instead of hoping they'll live up to their words, pay attention to what they actually do. Talk is cheap for a narcissist, and there's often a wide gap between what they say and how they actually behave. Don't brush off the warning signs. Instead of talking yourself out of what you're noticing or feeling, get honest with yourself about your own experience. On some level, narcissists count on the fact that you'll doubt yourself, that you'll second guess your own perception, and that keeps them feeling like they still have the upper hand. That's why journaling, talking to a trusted friend, or even just naming things out loud to yourself in the moment can be so useful. It creates a record, even an informal one, that you can return to later when the fog of confusion tries to creep back in and make you question whether you're overreacting or imagining things you're not. Trust the version of events you experienced in real time before anyone had the chance to rewrite it for you. But once you start seeing through their lies, their manipulation, and that carefully constructed sense of superiority they project, everything shifts. Once you can see past the performance, the whole picture becomes clear, and honestly, it becomes almost impossible to unsee. At that point, the best move is usually to mentally demote them, to stop giving them the weight and importance they've been used to having in your life. Rather than letting their presence unsettle you, you can flip the script and use your clarity as an advantage, becoming a steady source of honesty and good judgment in a situation that's anything but honest. Out of everything you can do, this shift in mindset is probably the most powerful tool available to you. It doesn't require confrontation. It doesn't require them to admit anything or apologize for anything. It simply requires you to stop participating in the illusion. And once you stop participating, even quietly, even privately, the entire dynamic starts to lose its grip on you, whether or not the narcissist ever notices the change. Instead of pretending things are fine or waiting around for some sudden change of heart that isn't coming, take off whatever rose-colored glasses you've been wearing and commit to seeing things exactly as they are, even when that's uncomfortable. There's real value in that kind of unflinching honesty and acceptance. To some extent, this is simply the reality you're working with. Narcissists, generally speaking, don't change. So stay true to who you are, no matter what. Someone who refuses to let toxic behavior reshape their character, who keeps choosing to focus on what's good and healthy, is someone a narcissist has almost no chance of manipulating successfully. The toxic people in your life genuinely don't know what to do with you when you show up honest, grounded, and transparent. It throws off their whole approach. Their entire playbook is built around reading your reactions and adjusting their tactics accordingly. So when you stop giving them predictable reactions to work with, they're left improvising, and improvising is not their strength. Most of what they do relies on a script they've used successfully many times before, on you and probably on others too. When that script stops working, they often escalate briefly, trying harder versions of the same old tactics before eventually losing interest and looking for supply somewhere else. Here's something else worth understanding. Nothing changes if you keep engaging with them the same way you always have. But eventually, someone with real integrity, someone paying close attention, will see through their act and recognize them for who they really are. Narcissists don't expect people to have that kind of insight because self-centeredness, like theirs, is often the exact opposite of the qualities that allow someone to truly see and understand others. That's why it matters so much to redirect your focus back onto yourself, to put your energy into building the best possible life for yourself, rather than trying to fix or manage someone who is never going to meet you halfway. Put your best foot forward, let your character and your kindness speak for themselves, and if living a good, honest life is truly your goal, know that you're already well on your way to achieving it. Redirecting your energy this way isn't about ignoring what happened or pretending the relationship didn't take a toll on you. It's about recognizing that the healthiest use of your time and attention is no longer spent trying to decode someone else's behavior, but spent instead on rebuilding whatever got worn down while you were focused on them, your confidence, your routines, your friendships, your sense of what a healthy relationship is even supposed to feel like. When you're dealing with a narcissist, staying quiet is genuinely one of the most powerful things you can do. Treating them as though they're not even worth engaging with is often the fastest way to take the wind out of their sails. Don't waste your time or energy trying to help them see the light or trying to get through to them. That's rarely, if ever, going to work. Sometimes the most effective response is no response at all. When you go quiet, when you stop feeding into their need for reaction, it sends a clear message that you're simply not interested in whatever they're trying to stir up. Your silence tells them, without needing a single word, that you're not an easy target, that you won't be pulled into their drama, and that you're not going to let them get away with the things they might try. Distance yourself from people who treat others with contempt or try to manipulate and deceive those around them. If you pull back and stop engaging, they'll often continue behaving the exact same way with someone else, but the less you talk to them, the more your own situation tends to improve. It can feel counterintuitive at first, especially if you're someone who naturally wants to smooth things over or keep the peace. But every conversation, every explanation, every attempt to clear the air is another opening for them to pull you back into the cycle. Limiting contact, even in small practical ways, whether that's shorter replies, longer response times, or simply choosing not to engage with certain topics at all, adds up over time into real meaningful distance. Another important habit is keeping track of your interactions with them. Documentation matters. With narcissists, there's rarely a clear black and white version of events that everyone agrees on, so having a written record can be incredibly valuable. When everything is documented, there's far less room for someone to twist the story or claim they never said something they clearly did. Save your emails, your text messages, your letters, anything in writing. You'll be grateful to have that evidence later on, especially if things escalate or you need to prove your side of the story. Keeping thorough records really is essential when you're navigating a relationship with someone like this because words alone tend to just fuel unnecessary conflict and confusion. This is especially true if there's any chance the relationship could end up involving lawyers, mediators, HR departments, or family courts down the line. A calm, factual paper trail speaks for itself in a way that memory and emotion simply can't compete with. Even if you never end up needing it for anything formal, the act of writing things down can help you stay anchored in reality when the narcissist tries to convince you that none of it happened the way you remember. Patience matters here too. Don't rush the process of putting a narcissist in their place or waiting for the truth to come out. Eventually it does. Strengthening your own sense of self and your inner confidence is key. The people I'm describing, the narcissists in your life, only allow those they've deemed worthy to get close to them. And honestly, all it really takes is time and patience for the truth to surface on its own. A narcissist's true nature tends to get exposed when the different threads of their story stop lining up, when the pieces they've carefully arranged no longer make sense together. Eventually, people around them start to notice, and the truth has a way of finding its way out. At some point, it becomes possible to have more grounded, reasonable conversations, either with them or about them, once the full picture is visible to everyone involved. Try not to stress too much about the timeline of all this, and give yourself permission to let go of the need to control how or when it happens. This kind of patience is hard, especially when you're the one who has been hurt and you desperately want some kind of acknowledgement or justice sooner rather than later. But chasing that outcome, trying to force people to see the truth before they're ready to, usually just keeps you tethered to the situation longer than necessary. Trust that consistency, time, and your own steady behavior will do more to reveal the truth than any argument ever could. That's really the core of what I wanted to share with you here. Take from it what resonates and feel free to explore more resources if you're looking to understand the long-term impact of narcissistic abuse and how to begin healing from it so you can move forward and build a life that feels safe, stable, and genuinely your own. One more thing worth mentioning: work on rebuilding your confidence and your sense of independence. Insults, lies, and smear campaigns are so much easier to withstand when you have a solid, grounded sense of who you are and a healthy self-image to fall back on. Reconnect with the love you used to have for yourself, for the people who genuinely care about you, and for your own story and history. People who lack empathy, who rely on deception and manipulation to get what they want, become far less appealing once you see them clearly for who they are. Put in the work on yourself. It pays off. Rebuilding that inner sense of stability doesn't happen overnight, and it's okay if it comes in waves rather than a straight line. Some days you'll feel completely free of their influence, and other days an old comment or memory will resurface and knock you off balance for a bit. That's normal. Healing from this kind of relationship isn't about never thinking about it again. It's about getting to a place where those thoughts no longer have the power to control how you feel about yourself. To bring this all together, narcissists spend their lives chasing validation from other people because that's ultimately what props up their fragile sense of self-worth. And that need often drives them toward manipulative, defensive, and sometimes cruel behavior. Underneath it all, there's usually some kind of unresolved emotional pain or depression that they're constantly trying to outrun by keeping themselves stimulated and surrounded by input from others. When it comes to protecting yourself, there are a few things that really matter. Don't fall for their gaslighting, stay calm, and pick your battles carefully. Let go of any hope that they'll fundamentally change and root yourself in reality instead of wishful thinking. Since genuine change is rare for narcissists, the healthiest approach is to stay true to yourself and stop pouring energy into trying to transform someone who isn't interested in transforming. By being honest with yourself and accepting things as they truly are, you can turn your clarity into a genuine advantage, becoming a source of steady truth and sound judgment even in the middle of chaos. In the end, dealing with a narcissist really comes down to three things: groundedness, acceptance, and honesty. Avoid getting swept up in their version of events, and no matter what, keep coming back to who you really are. If there's one thing worth carrying with you after all of this, it's that your peace doesn't depend on them ever changing, admitting fault, or seeing you clearly. It depends on you. On the decisions you make about what you'll tolerate, what you'll respond to, and how much space you're willing to give someone who has already shown you repeatedly who they are. You don't need a dramatic final confrontation to close this chapter. You don't need them to apologize or acknowledge the harm they've caused. What you need is simply to keep choosing yourself, quietly and consistently day after day, until the pull they once had over you fades into something distant and manageable. That's not weakness, and it's not giving up. It's one of the strongest things a person can do.